Well, good morning. Welcome to the um, Opioid and Prescription Drug Abuse Advisory Committee. I'm Alan Delapenna. I'm branch head for Injury and Violence Prevention at the Division of Public Health. And we're really happy that folks could join us today. We are going to focus on a justice-involved population. We started a pattern last December when we were meeting in person at McKimmon Center. We had a really great meeting on MAT, and part of the theme with OPDAAC is we're connecting with each other. We can't really go around the room and introduce each other, but we've started in this virtual environment of doing a poll to let folks know which disciplines, which type of work people are involved in. So if we could put the poll up and just kind of select where you fit in, and if you don't fit in on one of these categories, select something or do the other, and you can let us know. As we go throughout the meeting today, we'll have various speakers and panels, and we again try to keep with the tradition of what we do in person of trying to make this an interactive dialogue. So if you have questions that come up, go ahead and put them in the chat. There's a questions box at the bottom of the screen and a chat. We'll have folks, we prefer you to use the chat box to put your questions in. We'll have a team of folks monitoring the chat, and when possible, they'll answer in real time, or at the end of the speaker's time, we'll have somebody moderate and handle the questions coming in. So I think we probably had enough time for the poll. Let's see what kind of give us a sense of who's here. Okay. That gives you a little sense of who the audience is, the folks that are attending today. We really appreciate you making a priority during this holiday season to join us today and keep the work going on the opioid work. So our first speaker today is going to be Elyse Powell. She's the opioid coordinator at the division or the Department of Health and Human Services. So Elyse, I turn the floor over to you.
Thanks so much, Alan, and hi everyone. It's hard to believe just last December, so many of us were gathered in McKinnon to talk about justice-involved work. And I don't think that December we could have known how much our world was about to change, but I'm really thrilled to be back, albeit still virtually with all of you, to talk about not just what's changed in our broader world, but how our work to support both the justice system and people involved in the justice system in connecting folks with substance use disorders. So for those who aren't familiar, our guiding strategic document for addressing the opioid epidemic in North Carolina is the Opioid Action Plan. And when we updated the action plan in 2019, we set out 3 basic pillars of response. And these pillars of response were before we all became armchair epidemiologists, but it's what you do with any epidemic as a learning, right? You want to prevent, right? You want to prevent as many cases or issues as you can. You want to reduce harm, right? You want to reduce the harms associated with an illness, and you want to connect people to care, right? You want to make sure that when people do become sick, they're connected to the life-saving treatment they need, so we can reduce and avoid deaths. And that's true with our COVID response work, and it's just as true with our opioid epidemic response work. And when we set out that opioid action plan, we really wanted to have a focus on people involved in the justice system, and that means the justice system all the way through, from pre-arrest to post-release and community corrections, and every sort of piece of the sequential intercept model in between. And part of the reason we really wanted to focus on justice-involved populations is because we saw the emerging research that people who are involved in the justice system are dramatically more likely to overdose and die of overdoses. You know, I have the statistic up that I think I cite in almost every single one of my talks that, you know, people who are exiting North Carolina prisons are 40 times more likely to die of an overdose just in those first 2 weeks after being released. And so even prior to the COVID pandemic hitting, this is an incredibly important focus area for the department. All right, now you can go ahead. Unfortunately, with COVID hitting, we saw a really big increase in opioid overdoses. So after 2 years of decline in emergency department visits with opioid overdoses, North Carolina has seen a 24% increase in emergency department visits this year compared to last year. Now, those are with August's numbers, so we'll look forward to sort of updating this in the fall. But you know, really emphasize how much COVID not only brought a ton of new challenges to us, as evidenced by the fact that we're all meeting virtually, but really exacerbated gaps in the system that were already there, and so really hit our most vulnerable populations, including people who use drugs and people who struggle with substance use disorders, the hardest. So, you know, I think that that's a big sign to us that we need to double down on our support for these systems. So go ahead forward. So I wanted to sort of say thank you to all the panelists who are talking today. I think it's going to be a really rich conversation on tangible things folks can be doing right now to help stem the surge in overdoses that our state is seeing again during COVID, and really support folks who are involved in the justice system. And I did want to highlight, right, obviously we know that these programs take resources, and so we wanted to acknowledge that we're not showing up to the table empty-handed. So we will be releasing 2 RFAs to help support programs in this space. The first one, if you're a fan of rushing to finish your homework, is still open, but due soon. So that has a due date of December 15th. And that's our Opioids and COVID Supporting Justice-Involved Individuals with SUD RFA, and really focuses on supporting pre and post-arrest diversion programs, which you'll hear more about from Melissa Larson and many other wonderful folks. It also funds reentry programs, so reentry discharge planning programs, and it's pretty flexible funding, as well as a technical assistance support provider. So we are looking for someone to help provide technical assistance and support to other sites who are new to doing these programs. If you're not a fan, you know, hopefully all of you have you know, already gotten your applications ready and done, and you know you're excited to apply for this December one. Oh, thank you for the chat. So it is December 14th. So there's a typo on these slides. So apologies, everyone. If I thought you got an extra day. But if I also encourage folks to look for our second RFA. So this is through our federal grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So that's the Federal Department of Justice. We'll be posting that RFA mid-January. So for folks who are planning to apply to this December RFA, you'll know whether or not you've been awarded before you need to apply to the second opportunity. So it is intentionally staggered. You can be awarded for both, right? So if you apply to one, you absolutely can apply to the second one. And that'll fund pre and post arrest diversion programs again. It also has specific grant funding around MAT programs while folks are incarcerated, as well as overdose prevention education and naloxone distribution programs. So strongly encourage you to apply. Please reach out to myself or Margaret Bordeaux if you have questions about the RFA, or just chat them into the chat box. But wanted to, before we went into all of the wonderful programming for today, flag that there were these 2 funding opportunities out there for everyone. And that is it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elyse. Our next speaker, well, I'll introduce Margaret Bordeaux and Bob to take the next section, discuss the sequential intercept model. Margaret?
Thanks, Alan. So our next speaker will be Dr. Bob Kurtz, who will be given a reintroduction to some or an introduction to others about the sequential intercept model and talk a little bit about sequential intercept mapping opportunities for communities. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm going to be talking, as Margaret said, about the sequential intercept model. I confess I've got too many slides, so I'm going to be going very quickly through those, and I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have, at the end. The sequential intercept model, I'm going to talk about what that is, its history and development, a tour of the various stages in that model, how it can be used as a planning tool through sequential intercept modeling or mapping, and how it can be used to address the opioid crisis. The next. So first, some background. The sequential intercept model was developed as a way to envision how people with mental illness and criminal justice issues flow through the criminal justice system. As you know, there are high rates of people with behavioral health disorders in jail, particularly those with mental illness and substance use, and often co-occurring mental illness and substance use problems, and difficulties that result when those folks end up in jail when they don't really need to be there. Treatment can be delayed, coordination of care is difficult, and these individuals often end up in a cycle of repeated arrests and incarcerations that uses scarce resources for few good outcomes. Next. So the sequential intercept model can be thought of as a series of filters that at each level filters people out of the criminal justice system into treatment in the community when that can be done at little risk to public safety. In this model, as it says, can be viewed as a series of filters. The cone shape of the filter here reflecting the fact that more people can be diverted in a more cost-effective manner the earlier in that process, the better. Next. So this is how the sequential intercept model is usually displayed, moving from left to right. It shows how people with those behavioral health disorders flow through the criminal justice system. Each intercept can be thought of as a key decision point in the criminal justice system where people can be prevented from entering or falling further into the criminal justice system, from which it'll be harder to extricate them. I'd like to go through each of these different intercepts, describing a little bit about them and programs that may fit within those intercepts. Next. So the first one is at the community service level. And at this level, these are where individuals can be, end up with behavioral health disorders, end up in crises. And if often dealt with appropriately, they can be prevented from entering into the criminal justice system or even having contact with it to begin with. And at this level, you have mobile crisis teams, behavioral health providers, cross-trained and working with justice systems individuals, walk-in crisis centers, behavioral health urgent centers, urgent care centers, and facility-based crisis centers, and others. This is not a comprehensive list. Next. And next is at the initial contact with law enforcement, and some things that can be done at that initial, at this stage, is having dispatchers trained to recognize mental disturbance calls. At this level, you can have law enforcement assisted diversion programs, lead programs, CIT, crisis intervention teams fit at this level, and intervening with those super utilizers, those individuals who very frequently end up in crisis and end up in contact with law enforcement through providing post-crisis follow-up. Make sure that those individuals get what they need to be stable in the community. Next. At this stage is the initial hearing and appearance in court, and screening for mental illness, substance use problems can be important here. This is where pretrial supervision and diversion to reduce episodes of incarceration can occur. And data matching initiatives would be at this level, where, for example, using the criminal justice law enforcement automated data systems to match with the roster of those consumers in our public mental health system to identify those individuals early so that intervention can take place as early as feasible. Okay, next. At Intercept 3, you have the jails and courts level, where you have jail-based programming, behavioral health care for those people in jail. You may have treatment courts that can deal with those more effectively with people with high risk, high need, people with behavioral health disorders. Veterans justice outreach specialists may get involved when these folks end up in jails and courts as well. Next. And then if they're not diverted at these earlier stages, you can look at what can be done at their reentry from jail or prison. Transition planning can be particularly important at this level, making sure that people who need it get medication-assisted treatment for their opioid use disorders, having warm handoffs from corrections to providers to increase the likelihood of their service engagement. And next, some best practices for transitioning from jail to the community have been developed by the National Institute of Corrections, the Urban Institute's Justice Policy Center, and you can find their toolkit at that link at the bottom. Next. And finally, Intercept 5 is at the community corrections level, where you may have mental health probation officers with special mental health treatment or training to work with people with mental health problems, medication-assisted treatment, forensic assertive community treatment, FACT teams, and other such supports for those people who are in community corrections. Okay, next. Did want to mention the need to address racial disparities in admission to these criminal justice diversion programs. One concern is if efforts aren't made to try to assess the extent to which individuals may be disproportionately, people of color are disproportionately not diverted, and those who are, of the majority culture diverted can end up, unless steps can be taken to prevent it from those jail diversion programs contributing to racial inequities. So that's something to keep in mind and for those programs to make sure they address. Next. So we come to sequential intercept mapping. I'll describe what it is, how that works, and who does that, and its status in North Carolina. Next. So sequential intercept mapping workshops were developed by policy research associates, the technical assistance advisors for SAMHSA, for our federal agencies. And they've developed a very structured, methodical process of bringing communities together for about a day and a half to help map their local crisis systems, criminal justice systems, and examine at each level of the criminal justice system opportunities for diversion, gaps to be filled, and resources that can be tapped to help address the problem of people with behavioral health disorders ending up in the criminal justice system. And then following that day and a half workshop, getting all the community leaders together and set priorities and develop an actionable plan for how that community is going to address that issue. Next. So it requires some preparation, pre-planning, gathering information about each intercept, building that local map of the community, and developing consensus about what the priorities are going forward. Next. Now, collaboration across all these systems is really critical. Having everybody who really touches those people with behavioral health disorders in the same room, because we all have a different piece of these problems. You're reminded of the parable of the blind man and the elephant being described very differently depending upon what piece of the elephant they're touching. Addressing these issues can be like that. You need everybody in the room who has a piece of the solution to this problem. Next. This is a sequential intercept map. I believe this one is Wake County. And as you can see, it can be very detailed. It takes a good bit of work pulling this together. Okay, next. The action plan process comes after mapping, where you developed the goals, the objectives, what action's going to be done, by who and by when. Next. The end result of that mapping process is an analysis of resources and gaps at each intercept, sequential intercept map, the local system, and a written report that includes detailed actionable plan agreed on by all partners with clear priorities for where to begin. Next. This map shows where sequential intercept mapping has taken place in North Carolina and where it's been planned. The purple is where, prior to the pandemic, we were going to be holding some sequential intercept mapping exercises, but had to cancel those and due to COVID-19. Next. The sequential intercept mapping process has been used to address the opioid crisis, and SAMHSA, in fact, has a solicitation for applications to use policy research associates to come to a community to provide the sequential intercept mapping workshops to address a community's opioid crisis. And this is the front page of that solicitation. Next. A couple of objectives for that crisis are to encourage counties to organize their efforts within a cross-system shared infrastructure, and assist counties in selecting those priorities to guide those local efforts. Next. There are some key differences between a sequential intercept mapping for those people with serious and persistent mental illness and one for addressing the opioid use problem. The opioid SIM places greater emphasis on the first intercept, and they have different goals. The opioid SIM focusing on reducing overdose deaths, whereas the SIM for SPMI population aims to reduce their criminal justice involvement. And there are a few other differences, like greater emphasis on medication-assisted treatment, and different stakeholders are likely to be at the table for each of these different types of workshops. Next. So the status of opioid-focused SIMs in North Carolina, as I mentioned, SIM is those sequential intercept mappings are a proprietary product developed by policy research associates. We do have people who are trained locally and can provide those sequential intercept mapping exercises free of charge, but we don't have opioid-focused sequential intercept mapping in North Carolina yet. PRA is developed and is marketing that opioid-focused SIM and developing train the facilitator training on that opioid-focused sequential intercept mapping product. Next. And then these are just some resources for finding, to find a little bit more out about sequential intercept mapping and the sequential intercept model. Okay, that's it for my presentation. I went through that very quickly. If you do have any questions, please include those in the chat box and I'd be happy to answer whatever those are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And there is a question in the chat box for you now, but thank you so much for that presentation of the sequential intercept model. in Sequential Intercept Mapping. And thanks for providing the resources on the last slide.
Sure.
Like we mentioned earlier in today's meeting, the slides will be available around 7 days after today. They'll be located on the website. I'll bring us into the next part of today's meeting, and we are going to have a panel, and we're just really going to look at that model that Dr. Kurtz just laid out for us of, you know, how this work is really important, like Elyse said, at many points on the continuum of justice involvement. And so we brought in some programs from across the state who are doing really good things at their different points of intercept and have really strong programs and ways that they're working with justice involved individuals who also have opioid use disorder. And because this year has been really unique and challenging, these panelists will also talk about how COVID-19 has affected, you know, the work that they're doing. We want to kick this panel off by I want to introduce Sheriff Quentin Miller, who is the Sheriff of Buncombe County. And we have Sheriff Quentin Miller and also Sarah Gayton, who is a representative of Buncombe County's Sheriff's Office. And they're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that they do in the community and the work that they do at the Buncombe County Detention Center. And thank them for being here today.
Well, this is Sarah Gayton. I'm not sure if Sheriff Miller was able to join us. I believe he is unavailable at this time, so he sends his apologies. Things come up very quickly when you're the high sheriff. But one thing, if he were here, he would say we can't arrest our way out of this problem. The drug epidemic, the opioid epidemic ravaging our communities has hit Buncombe County particularly strong. We are at a major crossroads in the southeast between the two highways that cross through our county, and also the impact of drug using here in the particular region. But some of the approaches that we have here on Buncombe is, number one, a 21st policing strategy, data-informed practices, bringing the data forward and seeing what we can learn and how we more effectively can respond to what's going on. Having a problem-solving approach instead of just a very linear, this is the way we've always done it approach. So identifying what are the problems and how can we respond more effectively. And I will put in a plug for the Sequential Intercept Mapping. Buncombe County has been a recipient of those services, and they're very user-friendly, very practical, very helpful for making an entire system response. Partnership building. This is a huge strategy of 21st century policing as well. Who do we need to partner and align with to, again, effectively respond? And then organizational transformation. What is the old way of doing it? What are the best practices and the gold standards? And how can we evolve into those transforming ways that are ultimately more effective for our community? So we can't arrest our way out of this. How can we collaborate? I know that our city and our county and our sheriff's office and our first responders through EMS and fire have been working together to figure out what are ways that we can work more effectively together and respond to the problems at hand. So there's some active projects in place right now. It requires everybody at the table, everybody's investment and commitment to look at their piece and figure out how we can all move that needle forward together. So part of the reasons we've had so much success here in Buncombe, particularly in the detention facility, is because Sheriff Miller has identified with no question marks that responding to the opioid crisis is a priority. And one of the ways that we have addressed that is through implementing an MAT program, medication assisted treatment program, here in the detention facility. So I'm going to go through some slides. Again, like Dr. Kurtz, we've got a number of slides and they are data rich. I tried to include components in here that I would have thought helpful a year and a half ago when we first started this project. So if we could get those slides moving. So we live in a small rural county. It's considered urban on the federal profile, but we have a number of rural communities in our region. Our detention facility is nested right in the city center. And you see at the very bottom, the bookings there of 2019, we had over 11,000 bookings, which is about 30 folks coming in and out every day. of our building. And the averages of our arrestees who are reporting opioid use over about a 14-month period was around 94. So pre-COVID, the numbers were higher, post-COVID, they were lower, but 94 individuals coming in every month reporting opioid use. That's a pretty high number. About 66 of those individuals were unique persons, so there is recidivism factors in there. And then about 25 of those monthly arrests were on MAT. And that information is helpful when you're thinking about a program. How do you scale and how do you anticipate what your volume is going to be? One of the foundational steps we took when we were building this program was analyzing the death records that were coming out of our Register of Deeds and comparing them with the health department information, and then comparing that to our arrest records. And what we learned, and this is 2019 records, but the statistics are pretty constant over the past 5 years. But what we learned is that 63% of everybody who was dying in our county, all the registered deaths in our county, had at least one booking event in our facility. And if that 63% becomes our new number, our new percentile, right, our 100% number, 54% of those individuals were dying within 1 year of arrest. So this was incredibly significant information to learn, that half of everybody that was dying was moving through our building at one point in time, and then half of those individuals were dying within 1 year, 22% within 3 months. And this was also an incredibly pivotal data point in our program development. Again, this was, we analyzed data over 5 years, presented here as 2019, but on average, half of everybody who was moving through our building and dying of opioids were arrested and in the building less than 24 hours. So that told us that our time to have a meaningful intervention was very short. When COVID hit, we had one MAT program developed, and then out of nowhere, everything got put on pause. And so we had to reformat what was going on and how we were doing business. And so this information, again, speaking to the audience of folks who are looking to put MAT programs in their detention facility, understanding how the data works together, how the people move through the building is really pivotal. So when COVID hit, we shut down for a couple of months. We had to look at the numbers again. And what we learned is that the majority of our MAT users, individuals who were on a MAT prescription coming into the building, were being released within 3 days. And that was significant because that enabled us to relaunch with our continuation phase at that 3-day mark post-arrest. So what happens is, before we jump in and start continuing the medications, typically we wait 3 days, and that allows the majority of those individuals to leave the building, and it makes the volume of those we're serving more manageable in this restricted time of COVID. And then an interesting fact that presented as we were crunching those numbers, individuals who were using MAT had about a 12% recidivism rate. And those who were not, who were opioid users, were recidivating at about 30%. Now, granted, this is very limited data. It's about 14 months of data. So we look forward to seeing how those numbers play out with time. Next slide. So a small scope of what we're doing programming wise, at the bottom of this slide, you're going to see the basic timeline. And then in each section above, you'll see what interventions we provide. So when an individual is booked in, regardless of whether or not they're going to stay in the building, once they're booked, we identify if they're an opioid user. We just ask them. And if they say yes, that activates them getting an overdose kit, as well as a harm reduction and resource information sheet. If they're staying in the facility, they typically hit that medical intake of about 4 hours. And that's the juncture where we're screening for opioid use disorder. We're providing some very specific harm reduction information and also education around MAT and what resources are available both in the facility and then also in the community. They're given a self-referral that's got a number of social determinant of health questions on there and some priority questions, so we know what's important to them and how best we can serve them during their time here. And if they get out sooner than later, it's got follow-up information so they can still access those support services once they're released. If an individual comes into our building already on MAT, again, 2 to 3 days typically is when we start that medication resumption, and that's just so we can have a manageable program of volume that our facility can handle during these difficult times. And again, our numbers are very high. We also will do a wellness recovery action plan and provide peer support for that individual. And then if the individuals who are illicit opioid users who are not treated through MAT already, after that quarantine period, that COVID quarantine period at the 2-week mark, we bring them up to see our medical provider. They're able to review those intake papers that were completed for the opioid use disorder screening and make a MAT determination at that time. If the individual is not seen as being appropriate for our program criteria to dose in the facility while they're here, what we do is we do an induction at release order. And so they're able to get that medication when they're leaving the building and have 3 to 5 days to support them. And then we also work to connect them with the provider. So we really tried to stage the programming on these critical timelines, regardless of how long somebody's going to be here. If you're here for just a moment, we're going to give you some essential resources. If you're here for a longer amount of time, we're going to be able to serve you more. A lot of folks ask about the screening tool that we use. So this is just one example. This is our peer support navigation screening form. This goes to everybody who's here for that 4-hour mark. And we also have this information in the every overdose kit as well. And so you'll be able to access these more on the slides that are presented in a week. But again, we're trying to get a basic feel for what are their essential needs. Have they sought help before? Do they have ID? About how long do they feel like they're going to be in our building? This helps us prioritize and rally around the needs that are presenting. All right, again, for those of you who are looking to build a program, these details go a long way. So we do have criteria. Participant interest is a really big one, medical clearance, obviously, and the individual needs to be stable, both mentally and physically, here in our building to do and participate in that daily dosing. So if somebody comes in and they're not mentally or behaviorally stable, it's not an automatic rule out for our program engagement, but what it is it's a medication at release type of situation. And then we can also rally around them and work towards supporting their stability. We are a buprenorphine primary program. If somebody is coming in on methadone, we do have a buprenorphine detox protocol that we've started. We also will continue methadone if there's a medical necessity for that. And while in our building, folks are receiving 8 milligrams of buprenorphine. So if they're on a higher dose in the community, we do bring them down to that lower dose. And when they're released, if they were on a higher dose in the community, we do release them with their community level dose at release time. New inductions are started on 8 milligrams and they'll also be released with that dosage. So funding, that's always a big question. How did we get started? We did receive a grant from North Carolina Health and Human Services to launch us off. And then we've also been working with our community partners to secure additional safety net and overlapping population grants. We are in year 2 right now, and what we were able to accomplish in that first year was getting our MAT nurse and our medications grafted into our medical contract through the detention facility that's supported by the county. And we are working towards self-sustainability. So COVID, how did it impact our programming before and after? One of the biggest differences is we had a lot of group programming at the onset of this development. Now we don't have any group programming. Case management and peers were able to go to the housing unit to provide that real-time support. And right now we've got our peer nested up with our medical department, and she sees our program participants real-time as they're coming up to see medical. She's organically grafting into that timeline. Dosing used to happen at the top of the day on the medical unit, and now what we do is we dose in the very early morning at the end of the night shift on the housing unit, actually. And of course, the numbers coming in and out of the facility were much higher. Our daily population prior to COVID was about 560. And again, our capacity in the facility is 604. So we were really tight with our average daily population. Now, our population is between 350 and 360. So we don't have as many people coming in, which what that enabled us to do is as we reworked our program to support COVID realities and new operations, we were actually able to expand the amount of people that we were serving because the numbers were lower. So there are what I call game changers. These are pivotal moments in program development or pieces that really helped us move along. And I can't say enough about this first one. We have a community advisory panel, and this is a group of individuals who are former opioid addicts, individuals that are strong in their recovery, that have been in and out of the jail system, in and out of the treatment systems, and have a really intimate understanding of the experience of being in active addiction and in the judicial system. This group we've met with on average about on a quarterly basis. A lot of them are professionals in the community now, so they understand both of those worlds, but they've increased, they have changed the way we've done business, and one of the biggest ways is increased who we're serving. They really encourage us to look at our program criteria and challenged us to expand that, and we responded to that. They've changed our understanding of what success looks like. Before we had this big lofty idea of success was, full completion within the program, maintain their stability on the medications, and they said every treatment intervention, every positive interaction around treatment and recovery is a success. They've expanded our perspective regarding the work, how we do business, how we look at the work, and they've actually changed and informed on our program goals. So if your community doesn't have a panel such as this, and this is an informal gathering of people, I would really encourage you to reach out and find those key individuals in your community that can help you build this panel. COVID-19 forced us to look at the way we were doing business differently, and within that, we were actually able to improve what we were doing with our program. And then partnerships are key. Who are the individuals and the agencies in your community that you can, one, leverage their current resources, where you have overlapping goals and values that you can build the work more effectively, and expand what you're doing. So I always like the easy lift mentality. Often we can get overwhelmed with the size of a project, but I want to encourage everyone just to start today with little things. It can begin with how many folks that are on your caseload or in your population have an opioid issue, have overdosed. How many times have they overdosed? Our program started with a scrappy piece of paper at medical intake, doing tally marks that were counted up every month to begin to understand what we were looking at. And that built into the next systematic step in growth. Develop handouts and resource sheets. Can you just put together a list of resources to hand to key people that they can pass out along the way? Our patrol officers have asked for this. Our fire departments around our region have asked for this. Our jail is constantly asking. So put little things together that are easily that can be easily implemented. Harm reduction. Make some phone calls around your region. Who's got naloxone? What's the process? How do they pay for it? What are your options? There's a lot of little things that can start building into these bigger program development components. Program fluidity. If you're working with law enforcement and detention facilities, you have to be flexible to their hard lines. And we can't say enough about this. Any judicial legal system, understand where those parameters are and what you can do to work within those lines. Data is so helpful. It really tells a story of what's going on, and I have to confess, I'm not a huge data person, but I'm a believer now, and the more data I can get, the better our program becomes. And then having, like Dr. Kurtz was referencing, the sequential intercept mentality and modality in your work. Where are these natural crossroads where things are happening that you can implement an intervention, or that you can gather support and redirect folks? So here's another example. Buncombe County, not one person or one organization does all the work. Everything listed on this slide here are works that are collaboratives from multiple agencies, such as the Opioid Roundtable or the CARE team at the bottom. Multiple organizations come together to talk about what the needs, what the gaps are. And then the top two are county initiatives from the health department, from the communications department, ways that they're taking on the issue and expressing it and taking action steps within their area of expertise. So regardless of where you work or who you work for, there's meaningful things that you can do that are going to help move that needle forward. All of that said, we are thrilled to support any work that you all are doing out there. I know we've shared our workflows with the organization. So please feel free to reach out and ask questions or ask for support, whatever we can do. This is important work and it's good work. And if Sheriff Miller were here, he would really reemphasize we can't arrest our way out of this, and it's the right thing to do. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and we appreciate you and Sheriff Miller's willingness to present one today, and just please give him our very best. Sounds like some great work is going on in Buncombe County, really impressed, and we got a lot of questions in the chat. We've been managing them, but if there's some that you'd like to answer, please let us know if you can see them, okay?
Okay, I can't see them, but feel free to feed them if you want to take time for that, or we can address them in a different way.
We can do that too. We have some support in the background that can help us with that. So thank you for being willing to do so.
Sure.
All right. Next, we will look at a different point of intercept, and we'll look at, pre-arrest diversion, and we're going to look specifically at LEAD, which is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. We have Melissa Larson of North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition here with us this morning. Melissa, take it away.
Thanks, Margaret. I hope everyone's doing well. Next slide, please. So just real briefly, the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition, we're a statewide grassroots organization dedicated to the implementation of harm reduction initiatives, public health strategies, drug policy transformation, and justice reform in North Carolina. So with our mission, we really have been a key stakeholder in implementing LEAD programs throughout the state as we recognize the value that they bring. And so LEAD is an evidence-based pre-arrest initiative. It allows police officers at the point of contact to divert offenders with behavioral health issues away from the criminal justice system and into long-term intensive case management services based on a harm reduction philosophy. So as more and more agencies have realized that the use of the traditional criminal justice system is not appropriate or effective in addressing behavioral health issues, we're seeing the development of pre-arrest diversion programs throughout the state and the country. And what's great about LEAD is that it's a collaboration of existing stakeholders. They're willing to come to the table to do something different, to do something innovative. LEAD brings together treatment providers, law enforcement, the district attorney's office, the LME MCOs, harm reduction, and peer support partners. I love that it doesn't require building an entirely new program. That can be a very expensive endeavor. But it's really about bringing together existing stakeholders who share a common goal of reducing crime, increasing public safety, and connecting people with substance use disorders to treatment and supportive services. So operating within a harm reduction framework, LEAD recognizes that no one size fits all when we're working with our participants. Everyone is on their own journey. We need to meet people where they are. There's no compliance guidelines or sanctions for participants. And we believe in re-engaging them in services and not providing punishment when things are not going as planned. And so the LEAD program also recognizes that not everyone is treatment ready at the time of interaction with law enforcement. This is obviously a new conversation between officers and people, and they meet in the field who have a substance use disorder. But for those individuals who are ready, the program is structured in a way that provides the referring officer a process in which they can conduct a warm handoff to a case manager. And LEAD eligibility is for low-level drug offenders and sex workers. The majority of people that are referred by officers into the LEAD program is actually through social referrals and not charge diversion. So as it's technically a pre-arrest diversion program, what we're seeing is officers know the individuals in their communities, and they may have a long history with them, and they may know some of that personal information. And so it's really heartwarming when we have a new department come on board with LEAD and they have a whole list of people that they know that could really benefit from this program. Next slide. So in talking about the sequential intercept model, pre-arrest diversion sits within intercept 1. The purpose is to divert individuals from the entire criminal justice system and into a therapeutic setting. I think we can all agree the criminal justice system was never intended to be therapeutic, yet we've continued to process people with underlying behavioral health issues through it, expecting some type of elusive significant change. We have two broad goals within the LEAD program. The first one is to decrease crime-related activity, and the other is to increase access to treatment and supportive services. So they really build upon each other. And we've seen this within our North Carolina lead sites. Prior to COVID-19, the sites that are running criminal histories and really doing a lot of good data collection, we were seeing an 80% reduction in criminal activity among our participants pre and post lead. But since COVID-19, this is reduced to 60%, but that's still a significant decrease in the amount of criminal justice activity. Additionally, we've also seen participants engage in services that they had not previously been involved in, from harm reduction to more traditional treatment services. And I can't speak enough about the value of peer support. You know, when you're developing a lead program, you obviously have your case manager, but to have that peer support component, which provides the harm reduction services, they're out there in the community working one-on-one with individuals, the impact is very significant. And success within the LEAD program looks different from each participant. We're looking for any positive change. LEAD is not necessarily a structured program in the sense that people are moving through phases. They can be in the program as long as they need our support. Next slide. So COVID-19 has undeniably affected our participants and our program. Our case manager and outreach specialists, they've had to find new ways to connect with participants and keep them engaged. They've experienced challenges and barriers none of us were prepared for, such as altered treatment hours, social distancing, which has changed the availability of outpatient groups, economic barriers, and isolation. So to help them with these changes, our case managers and peer support specialists have maintained steady communication with our project partners just to find out what type of revised hours and procedures they may have at their organization. We've altered how to provide harm reduction services in the community to maintain social distancing. And we shared virtual recovery group information with our participants and also worked with them on self-care, goal setting, filling your time, stress reduction. Next slide. Programs operating a LEAD program in North Carolina. There's about 60 or 62 nationally, started probably about 5-6 years ago on the West Coast. And there's quite a movement across the country to implement this type of pre-arrest diversion program. And so I've listed all the current sites that we have in case there's anyone that's maybe a neighboring jurisdiction and you want to hear about how they're operating their program. And I've also mentioned a couple of our treatment providers. The list is actually very, very long, but I did, just for the sake of space, just put the ones who are MOU partners, just to give you an idea of who's at the table. We also have our MCOs on board, Via Health Partners and Alliance Health. And I know I'm a serious speed talker, so I went through my presentation really fast, but I want to tell you that despite COVID, we're still seeing a lot of good results from this program. Earlier this week, the Wilmington lead site had their case staffing, and we've migrated to virtual case staffings. And a case staffing is when all the key stakeholders get together every other week to go through our participant list and just talk about our individuals. How are they doing? How can we support them? What are any gaps or barriers that they're facing? And it was just so heartwarming to be a part of the Wilmington's case staffing this week, because so many of their participants, they're doing well and they've accessed employment, and they're just in a good space. And so there are a lot of people at the table that are working really hard to support our participants. And then this morning I checked my email, and our case manager from Fayetteville had sent an email and just said, hey, so-and-so is doing really well, and they just got that job at Walmart. And so you're like, yes, this is why we do what we do. So it's really important work, and it's a lot about bringing those existing stakeholders together who, like I said, have that shared common goal of connecting people to services and helping them provide good outcomes. So I've got my contact information down there. NCHRC is more than willing to help any community that's interested in exploring a LEAD program. We have sample policies, MOUs, we have documents from our other LEAD sites in which we all just do a lot of sharing, so there's no duplicating unless you really want to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for giving folks, some information about the LEAD program and sharing those successes in Wilmington. So always really great to hear successes. Thank you. Next, we're going to turn it over to Michelle Gunn, who's also in Wilmington. This is just a coincidence. Michelle is directing Coastal Horizons Justice Services, some of their reentry and support programs, and it's dispositional court in some ways as they make connections with folks while they're still incarcerated and support them as they return into the community. So here you are, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So to the first slide, please. My name is Michelle Gunn, and I am with Coastal Horizon Center, where we provide services in more than half of North Carolina's counties with the goal of healthier lives, stronger families, and safer communities. However, today, as Margaret stated previously, I am here specifically to talk about one of our reentry programs. That program is the RESET program, which is Reentry Systems for Effective Treatment. Next slide, please. So the goals of the RESET program, as you see right in front of you, are certainly to reduce recidivism among project participants by decreasing alcohol and drug use, thus increasing the safety in New Hanover County. Also to reduce the health, social, and economic costs of substance use and co-occurring disorders. We have an ultimate goal, certainly, to reach people where they are and to provide the needed services that people state that they need. Our target population for this particular grant, which is funded by SAMHSA, is 18 years and older for both men and women, for individuals who have substance use or co-occurring disorders, and individuals who are serving at least a 3-month sentence on a new charge or a 30-day probation violation on a charge in New Hanover County Detention Center. That particular component was a mandate of the grant. And so certainly we face a little dichotomy with trying to certainly release folks early from prison or jail, and or to divert people from jail altogether. So in this particular instance, what we have been able to do is for those individuals that are eligible or would have received a suspended sentence of that same time frame, we're able to work with those individuals immediately. The program for us is 9 to 12 months in length. Next slide, please. So in RESET program, I think one of the most important parts of our program is that we do in-reach. So prior to in-reach, what happens is that generally someone will send us over a referral. So it could be the New Hanover County Detention Center staff, could be a public defender, it could be a private attorney. We also receive self-referrals as well. So once we receive that referral, we actually go inside the jail to conduct our screenings for the individuals who are interested in the program. Once that person receives their screenings for the program, and some of the screenings, certainly we use evidence-based screening tools. We use the RANT, which is the risk and need triage. We use the correctional mental health screen for both men and women. And we also use the TCU drug screen with the opioid addendum. We also have our clinicians who actually go inside the jail to actually conduct the clinical assessment for that particular person. If the person after that is certainly eligible and is still interested in the program, the person is enrolled in the program, and we start delivering services immediately. Individuals are provided MRT services in jail. Individuals are also provided comprehensive case management while they are in jail. We help to develop their transition planning around the needs of the person. We help to connect them, if need be, to MAT treatment as soon as they are released from jail. We also provide prescription assistance. We pay for medications throughout their entire duration in the program. So that's generally about 12 months of prescription assistance, while we're also working to ensure that they get connected to long-term prescription assistance programs. We also provide housing for individuals. We provide the payment for up to 90 days in a recovery house for individuals. So we help the individual select the recovery house of their choice. And once the person moves in, we are responsible for their security deposit and or initial fees of the program, as well as their 90 days of living in the program. Generally, when the person is first enrolled in the program, they're also eligible to receive IOP services. So individuals receive IOP. We provide the transportation. So we pick up individuals from the recovery house or their personal house if they've chosen to go back to their own homestead. We provide transportation to treatment. We provide transportation to all medical appointments. We also provide transportation for employment searches as well as benefits that they may be eligible for. So that may mean transportation to Department of Social Services, to vocational rehab, to employability programs that are local, to the NC Works Job Center in our county. And we certainly make those connections, not only with those specific programs, but to ensure that people who are eligible to receive those services are actually able to receive it. We have peer support specialists, certainly with lived experience and learned expertise, who are working with individuals to ensure that their needs are met and to help facilitate the pathway for individuals. COVID has certainly distracted a bit from our work. However, we keep pressing forward because we are going in the jail. There was a time in which we unfortunately were not able to go in the jail, but however, we were able to do our case management as well as enrollments for individuals via the telephone with individuals. So what happens is that we call the jail, we schedule up an appointment for a particular client, and that client goes to the Office of Community One, which is another support agency in the jail. They go to that office and we conduct our either case management appointment and or enrollment session and or screening session. We also offer PIO, which is Parenting Inside Out, inside the jail. So we really try to offer as many services as possible inside the jail so that individuals, once they come out, are able to certainly transition to finish those same services and also look for employment if they choose to, make sure that they get the benefits perhaps that they're eligible to receive, and or look for the educational opportunities that they desire to do. Next slide, please. And so the last slide, I just wanted to emphasize that we at Coastal are certainly passionate about reentry because we realize that people are certainly much more than their worst mistake. Mistakes certainly do not define us, and Reset provides an opportunity and a chance to provide resources to people whose addiction has oftentimes been criminalized. So in Reset, you'll find that it's someone's friend, it's someone's buddy, it's someone's sister, someone's son, someone's mother, someone's wife. So we make sure that we treat people like people, provide the dignity that they so deserve, and we try our best to provide folks with the needed services that they desire. And so our goal ultimately certainly is to meet people where they are, to provide treatment for people that they need. And what we are also doing is working with our local jail to provide MAT induction services at the jail. We have not yet finalized that final step. However, we're certainly working toward that. However, if there is any information you need about our particular program, feel free to contact me. My information is on the very next slide. Feel free to contact me at the email and/or telephone number that's listed there. I want to thank Margaret and the whole crew for inviting us just to tell about our program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michelle. And there's some questions in the chat, and we'll direct those towards you. But one thing, and I know you mentioned it a little bit, but one of the questions that it's not a question, it's like I need a response from you, so I'm going to pose it in a question to really describe how that advisory committee really drives the program and the makeup of that.
Absolutely. So we do have an advisory committee that meets every month. And so that advisory committee is filled with individuals from the community that have, number one, an impact on the lives of individuals that happen to be just as involved, but also filled with individuals that have a lot of resources for our clients. So we have the probation officers that are on that advisory committee. We have the DA's office. We have community partners, the Cape Fear Community College, NC Works Job Center. We have treatment educational partners on that advisory committee as well. Public Defender's Office. So we're all in the room together to figure out what's the best plan for this particular person, or what's the best plan for individuals that may need our services. Nothing is, say, cookie cutter. Every person certainly treated as an individual, but I think that the advisory committee is certainly instrumental in our success. And I also failed to mention that the individuals that are in the program generally are on probation. The probation officers actually reside in our office. So we have one male and one female probation officer. And so they're actually there in the office. And so what individuals see is, what individuals have is the opportunity to, certainly schedule an appointment with us, take care of all of their needs on site, and also meet with the probation officer if they have a meeting there. And we also provide transportation to and from their meetings with the probation officer. So it's generally, whenever the PO schedules an appointment, it's at a time where the person may have had an appointment with us. So maybe before and or after, so that we don't interrupt what the person already has going on, specifically their job responsibilities. So what we don't want to do is, allow folks to continue to miss work because they have PO appointments. We want to allow folks to certainly work as much as possible. And we want to make sure that folks keep their jobs. So I think that it's extremely convenient that the probation officers are right there in the office with us.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate having you here this morning. Before we go into the next panelist, I just want to remind everyone, if you're going to put a question in the chat, make sure it's directed to all panelists and attendees. Thank you so much. So we'll move right along. Our next presenter is Nicole Sullivan. She is with North Carolina's Department of Public Safety. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And is it still morning? Yes, it is. Good morning to everybody. To talk a little bit about what the Department of Public Safety and particularly our reentry efforts for individuals who are leaving incarceration is certainly a topic near and dear to my heart, and things we've been doing a number of things, but it goes without saying that obviously the impact of COVID on prison facilities is being felt, and it has impacted what we've been able to do. Agency staff are working so hard in the facilities, and I think where Michelle kind of left off thinking about people, just remember that there are people who work in the Department of Public Safety and certainly in our prison facilities. And they are working very hard to manage COVID in that environment, but also help people make these transitions, because that's still happening even in this environment. So just kind of thinking about what we've been doing over the past couple of years, and I apologize, I don't have slides. So I'll just kind of be talking about the basics of what we do, particularly where we've started some new initiatives around designated reentry facilities, where individuals are going to those facilities. And right now we had, prior to COVID, we were working with 12 minimum custody facilities and had planned in this year to look at a couple of facilities at medium custody and close custody. Surprising for most folks, not everybody transitions out of prison in minimum custody. There are a number of folks, in fact, maybe about 10% of the population leave from close custody. And so programming and availability and the opportunity to interact with community resources and so forth is limited at those higher custody levels due to that security. So we are looking at models of how we do reentry and do that warm handoff that I think Dr. Kurtz talked about in the model of how do we connect people, and that's what we're trying to do. So I'll speak about what we're doing in minimum custody, and we hope to replicate as best we can at those higher custody levels, but recognizing some of those challenges that those higher custody levels do present. So at those minimum custody facilities, ideally, the concept is what people are doing, their programming, whether it's education or work release, those interactions are part of that reentry process. So folks are volunteering because of where they're going home to. They're volunteering to say, let me go to a facility when I still have 1 or 2 years left on my sentence to really focus in on what I need to do for reentry. And so that is, I want to get connected with my family or reconnect with my family. I want to think about my housing options. I want to think about job opportunities. I need to think about transportation. I need to think about childcare or those types of issues, substance abuse, substance use disorder, those things. So it's really an opportunity when they come to these reentry facilities is to really kind of focus in on what's the plan and what's my plan. So it's very person-centered, very based on the individual, but it's also really bringing these resources to the facility so that each individual can kind of identify what they're going to need. And so that process of planning, of programming, of bringing resources, educating, that's probably the biggest thing that we see that needs to be done as a part of the reentry process, is educating folks about what resources are out in their community that they're going home to and how to connect to those. I think the other thing that we have seen that's very important in the process is that folks are beginning to build that relationship and that rapport before they leave. And so it's very important that we have those resources coming into our facilities and beginning to build that relationship. People are seeing folks coming, they're coming and talking to them about resources, and they can start having those conversations and they can start planning for what they're going to need to do when they're leaving prison. Of course, due to COVID, all of that has stopped because we do not have that traffic coming in and out of our facilities. So, that's the challenge there, is kind of still working with people and planning and sharing and educating, but we don't have that physical presence of those resources coming into our facilities to do that work. So it is significantly impacted right now due to COVID. I will say one of the bright spots that we're beginning to delve into is the use of technology as a part of the reentry process and just overall. I think one of the opportunities that COVID is going to demonstrate for the correctional system, and particularly in prisons, is the need for technology all across the system and to enable individuals to, again, do those connections with family, to be able to reach out to service providers and continue planning even in the midst of a situation. And it could be the COVID, it could be a hurricane, different weather events really impact prisons and programming. So technology would allow us to continue to do those things. So there's a push even now to really bring that technology into facilities and the use of specially designed and specially programmed tablets to facilitate communication and help folks make plans with community resources and communicate with community resources prior to their transition from prison. So we're looking forward to that. We hope that that's going to grow and expand, and that will also help us in programming, education, so forth. So we're looking forward to using that technology and really helping us ramp up what we want to do on the reentry side, which is really about connections. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is what the department has been doing with our local reentry councils. We've established about 17 councils across the state, covering 19 counties. So we have one or two that cover multiple counties. Most local reentry councils are single county efforts, and primarily there, the department has worked with community-based local resources, really wanted to invest in reentry work, bringing people together, like-minded stakeholders who said, you know, we really need to focus on reentry. People are gonna come home to our communities, and what resources are gonna be available? How do we help folks get back on their feet? How do we help individuals access necessary resources? And that, you know, that includes everything from, you know, work that they need to do or connections they can make through being a veteran. Again, getting licenses, getting connected to training, getting connected to jobs, just all the things that folks need to do as they make those transitions out. And so through the local reentry councils, we have set up kind of this collaborative, and we've got dedicated reentry resources that are there in that community. They are identifying what the services are in their home, in that community, and they're bringing that together so that when an individual says, I need help with X, whatever X may be, that ideally that council has brought that resource to the table, and then we can make that referral to that partner right there in that community. Again, our local reentry council staff are kind of the people who help to organize that and coordinate those services, making those referrals to those providers, and just kind of helping to get folks connected to the services that they need. We tend to focus primarily on housing, employment, and transportation in those councils. They will make referrals to some of the great community programs and services that you've heard about already. And I know Karen Buck is going to talk a little bit more about some other things that we're doing in the community, but it really is trying to identify what's in that community and making those connections and helping to support people to make that successful transition into the community. I think the big part of that is the role of some of the reentry probation officers we have. So as a part of our designated facilities, we do have reentry probation officers who are also a part of that prison team. Again, prior to COVID, they were going and being at and essentially having an office at the prison. And they were definitely working with the reentry population and helping them make connections, think about what supervision is going to look like, communicate with that supervising officer in the community. And again, it's all about that seamless and warm handoff to the community, making sure folks are prepared, understand what they're going to experience, and then that they're getting that support to make that transition. So that's a huge part of what we're doing with the designated facilities. And then as folks transition out and are utilizing the services of the local reentry councils, and that reentry probation officer being able to either hand off, and in some instances, the reentry PPO has been able to be the supervising officer once people step into the community. So really a seamless transition there. So those resources are important. Having those councils in place are important. We hope to be able to expand the councils. We try to initially start with more of our urban areas of the state, and we've got those covered. And then we've got definitely some rural areas. But there are a number of counties that are interested in becoming councils. And we also want to know who's out there who's interested. And there's a lot of work going on right now to identify reentry points of contact in all 100 counties. And so we look forward to being able to share more information about just reentry points of contact all across the state. Again, even where we don't have councils, we at least want to have a person, a group, an organization, a set of service providers that we can refer to, because we do release people all across the state. And we want to make sure that people are getting connected in all these communities, not just in our urban areas. The last thing I just wanted to mention, which is also another significant step for public safety in our prisons, and we've heard a little bit about this, is about MAT. So the department is collaborating with DHHS. I haven't seen Elyse in a while, but we were working closely and attending several meetings last year around a reentry MAT project looking at a few of our designated facilities and being able to start some kind of MAP protocol with individuals prior to them being released. And so that effort is underway. Again, of course, it's been impacted by COVID, but we're still hard at work having those conversations. And we've identified 3 of our designated reentry facilities, as well as work with some of our pregnant women coming out of NCCIW, who would be on that MAP protocol, and then getting them connected to reentry resources as they transition into the community. So maybe in the future, we'll be able to report more on that project, but a big part of that has been educating the folks in the system about how to do that. I think looking at the presentation from Buncombe County, those are some of the steps and the things that we're having to go through and wrap our brains around. So we're doing that work, and we look forward to being able to initiate that project probably early next year as we get those resources in place and get that initiative going. But that has been a big learning curve for prisons. So, but I think we've kind of figured out how we can do it, and we're looking forward to initiating that and then being able to connect people to resources in the community. I think the one other thing I just want to mention, which is so critical for us, is around healthcare services. And so we've been doing a lot with UNC and the FIT program, formerly Incarcerated Transition Network, and bringing community health workers into our facilities as well to help with that transition. So we're really looking at health and those things as well to make sure that folks are getting connected and have access to care. So that's kind of what's happening on the reentry front. But again, we are really impacted by COVID, but we're trying to continue doing as much as we can do on these other initiatives, because at some point it will be over and we'll be back to full steam reentry business here in the future. So thank you very much, Margaret. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks a lot for the update. We'll also be looking forward to what's to come in the new year. And as Alan said before, this is turning into a tradition. Maybe we meet same place, same time next December. But thank you so much. And I'm going to steal a line from your presentation and talk about, Department of Public Safety and put into practice that seamless transition by welcoming Karen Buck to the conversation, who represents community corrections, and some of those things that Nicole briefly mentioned. Karen can offer more detail about and explain that program and those programs to us. So thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Margaret. And it's always hard to follow Nicole. She's my supervisor, and she's just a wealth of information and always keeps us going. I do not have slides. I guess we're the slideless DPS crew, but I do have some rich data that was given to me by Catherine Arsenault and Maria Fernandez from DHHS that was reported on throughout the grant of the MAP pilot. So I'm basically talking about we started in 2017, and this is kind of the second. We actually reported out at the first opioid conference and had the privilege to do that with some other speakers. And so this is the update. It has since ended. This was a MAP pilot that DHHS wrote the grant for us, a SAMHSA grant, specifically for people with the opioid disorder. Ardell County and Wilkes County were the 2 counties. Addiction Recovery Services, ARMS. Chanel Bowen was the lead counselor. And Wilkesboro Comprehensive Treatment Center, Greg Moon was the main counselor. So both clinics, they had methadone, buprenorphine, naltrexone, counseling, individual outpatient, intensive outpatient, individual therapy, peer support, and many other activities. I'm probably not encompassing them all, but there was 363 people throughout. We had a 4-year, we had an extension. The target was 250, so we went well over the target with the extension. Ardell served about 156 and Wilkes 207. 64% were male and 26% were female. The average age was 33. The age range was 18 to 24. So that's kind of the setup. Now I wanted to talk to you about our journey. So there was a lot of planning by DHHS and probation and Duke University. They helped out with the education, the preliminary education with probation. They did a day of understanding MAT, the MIST, the treatment, DSM diagnosis, science of addiction, counseling, medications, withdrawal. It was really overwhelming. It was a lot of good information, but I tell you, when Dr. Nagy from Duke spoke, I think he really reached the officers. He's been a prior federal probation officer, and he just shared his experiences and meeting people where they are. And that, I think Michelle mentioned that, and how we all need to work together. But he said this story about when he was an officer, he had people lined up for the day, and he had 3 no-shows. And then finally, one of the gentlemen appeared and came to his appointment. And he's like, well, why did you get here? He just asked him that. And he said, well, because I'm here for my boys. I have twin boys, and I want to be a better dad to them. And, you know, I think that hit us all, is whatever that internal driver motivation it is, you know, if we can reach some of that and come to a common place of where they are, that kind of helps move you through whatever type of treatment you're doing, about uniting their family and understanding how, if we really work together with the program, how we can get that person to a better place. So I will tell you that 4 years ago, that day in the room, I think most officers were probably thinking, this is an exchange of one drug for another. But now, 4 years later, they will tell you their success stories and their own experiences with their probationers, that they went through seeing the changes of going through the program, counseling, getting jobs, all the things that happen, and not at once. It's certainly about recognizing those small steps they take along the way. So the pilot ended in August 2020, and all participants were either moved to self-sufficiency or to some of the SOAR funding that's available, the federal state opioid response. And that's some of the things I know Nicole talked about, even with the women in prison, is that we can make this seamless. So if they're returning to a county that has, you know, whatever MAP program and they receive SOAR funding, we could start them out with those things too. So, I mean, that's our goal, is to move through the system and be as seamless as possible. So I will tell you the key ingredient was the staffing. I think I heard Melissa, who I know pretty well from Pitt County, she actually taught me the intercept model. She talked about the staffing that they do on their cases. Well, this is what we did. The counselors actually came to the probation office once a month, if not twice a month, because all officers were involved. We did not specialize. We wanted to see across the board how that worked, and also educate all officers, because there's nothing like the experience. So in the conversations, they discussed the treatment participation, the phase level, there's phases of MAT, medications, what kind of medications, generic, brand name, those kind of things, job status, school, family, drug test, arrests, you know, that the cross education that occurred with the counselors understanding what the officers were seeing when they went into the home, and the struggles and the personality conflicts, you know, how can they address that therapeutically? And also, there were times there were arrests, or, you know, addressing noncompliance in an appropriate manner for where the person was. So they learned to do that together. And that was definitely, the preliminary education was good, but you don't really retain things until you use them. And then that constant information about how they respond in treatment by increasing whatever it is, the dosage or the medication, the treatment, counseling sessions, those kind of things. And then what we did on the supervision side, if sometimes, you know, they were going out at night, we might have to use curfew or electronic monitoring, those kind of things. We also use, probation is about structured worksheets. So we use carry guides, thinking reports, decisional balance. There's a lot of risky thinking going on along with the addiction. There's so many things to tackle at once. Sometimes just talking to them about how they're going to get through that week, and what things to avoid, and building those pro-social supports. So there's so many things. How do we prioritize? And we would decide that as a team. I mean, hats off to Ardell, counselors and probation, because they, you know, these folks did the work. I'm just lucky enough to get to present the information. So here's some of the positive outcomes. This information, like I said, DHHS could give you more details. I'm just kind of hitting the highlights. But housing became more stable. So the percentage of people living in a residence that they owned or rented went up 35% versus just relying on others, being that couch surfer. So that's huge because, you know, we have an extremely transient population coming out of prison. And thank goodness for all of you out there that help us in trying to link housing and services and treatment, because it is more and more a huge obstacle for us. And I know our transitional houses, the beds are full all the time, just to see what we can do. So that was a plus. And then more people became full-time and part-time employed. So 68%, there was a change that they had that. And then their average income increased from $722 to $1,676. Substance use declined, of course, the overall goal. Most commonly, they were misusing prescribed medications at first, and all substances. There's a whole list of them. I don't have that with me to go over. We can certainly see if there is a report that can be produced by DHS, but went down 50%, except marijuana went down 42%. But, you know, and I know as probation officers, we have to still report violations, but a hard drug versus marijuana is certainly progress. Injection drug use went down 90%. I mean, a tremendous effect on their use. But that was surrounded by the supports. There were peer supports involved and those kind of things. Less criminal justice involvement. So, and all this data is they collected at intake the first 30 days and then at 6 months. So committing crime, arrested and confined, 58% change in that 6 months of no new crimes. And, you know, whether it's, you know, small misdemeanors or even up to felonies, this is huge because you're breaking that cycle with somebody that has a severe substance abuse. Plus 43% had co-occurring disorders. So mental health and substance abuse, 51% were females. Of course, the females usually have a greater co-occurring than the males, but 39% of the males. And another project that I work on with Sonia Brown, our administrator, is our specialized mental health, which UNC, Dr. Cuddyback and his group have really helped us, been working with us with BGA grants and different things in establishing our standard operating procedures, hiring, clinical oversight, those kind of things. It's very similar statistics of co-occurring. And then with severe and persistent, 15% of the males have severe and persistent, and 30% of the males, 30% of the females usually do. So a lot of data, but very same trends, whether you're talking medicated assisted treatment, severe mental illness, those kind of things. The inpatient stays, so 5 were hospitalized at intake, but none of them had an overnight stay. So, you know, you think about the people that medicated assisted treatment, they may be usually going in and out of the hospital for different things, several medical issues that usually come up. So that's pretty profound. But this is very similar to what we've seen with the specialized mental health. Is 61% experienced trauma or a violent episode. And that's, you know, the officers understanding that and trauma-informed care, those kind of things. I know they address that at the clinic, but also that's brought forward to the officers and understanding that. And, you know, some of the experiences were repeated nightmares, avoidance issues, or on constant guard. So if you have somebody that you understand that has been through significant trauma, you're definitely going to respond to that and use your motivational interviewing to understand where they are. And Dr. Nagy went into a lot of that too, which helped out. And then having your clinical support monthly to kind of talk through those things. What are the best approaches? That helps with the MAT too. So the more we can work together, obviously that's going to help out. having a greater understanding. And then increased pro-social activities was another positive outcome, that they use peer supports, self-help, religious or faith-based recovery groups, reunite with family, maybe doing activities with their kids or grandchildren. We did have a married couple that finished, and one of the ladies she got off supervision, and I had talked to her, and she had been through a lot of trauma before she started using, and she was so thankful to her officers, the supervisor. This was in Wilkes County, and she couldn't say enough how it supported she and her husband. So that's a whole family unit. Their lives have changed, which was kind of neat. So, and just, our officers, this is a quote from one of the chief probation officers. He said, "The program officer offers a non-judgmental alternative for treatment without stigma, commonly associated with substance abuse. If we save one life, we're moving in the right direction." Amen to that. And then Anna Knapp, she's from Wilkes County. She's actually in our specialized mental health now, but she still crosses over. She's got still a few clients. I had talked to her this week, and they are still reporting for dosing with COVID. The treatment, they can do telehealth, or they can report to the group, which is good because, telehealth is good, but sometimes there's that counselor reinforcement that happens with that therapeutic relationship by going into the group. So I'm glad that they're able to still have some of those small groups. But she's done a lot of worksheets. She actually created a trauma worksheet, your substance use understanding, your past history, things that officers can use to get the conversation going and kind of see where they are and move on that. And what can we do to get you to the next spot? So I think the theme here today throughout is how we can all work together and understand each other and share information. Our common goal is certainly to have them have a healthier lifestyle and to be productive in the community, but also, feel good about themselves. So I'm pretty proud of everybody that's done the work. I know they're still working together. We don't have the formal staffings like we did as much, but I know that they've educated each other. They pick up the phone. Knowing each other so well really helps with the relationships. When you build those relationships, you always have them. So I don't know if I've gotten a lot of questions. I was staring at the other screen.
I think most were comments for you, Karen. It's just how that's a really great program, and just a lot of folks we're glad to hear, like how the officers were involved and how you're having those successful outcomes. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you all. I know we were a little over. Margaret, I wanted to give you a chance if you had any closing comments for the panel.
Yeah, just want to tell all of the panelists, thanks so much. And also thanks to some of the folks who are attendees that had a lot to offer to the conversation in the chats. We got a lot of questions coming in, and I'll tell folks, if we weren't able to get, answers to your questions, please reach out to us, and we'll try to connect you to the panelists, or if we can answer them. And I want to thank everyone for all of the support in the chat box. So just wanted to recognize things were moving really fast and we were having some issues, but we are committed to getting folks the answers that they seek.
Thank you, Margaret. And just another big thank you to all of the folks who generously shared their time to join on as panelists and share their information today. These meetings are always an exchange of information. We all learn from each other. We try to connect with each other, and I just learned so much today. And I'll say, for me, it's such a positive way to end 2020, knowing that there are so many people dedicated in North Carolina that are doing great work, making the state a better place and helping people out, meeting them where they are. And hopefully we'll continue this dialogue as we go into 2021. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your time. Really quickly, our next meeting will be January 22nd, and we will focus on racial equity. We'll have some information shared from the statewide task force. And we have our next opioid summit scheduled for the first week in May. You'll be seeing us save a date coming out for that sometime in the next couple of weeks, and it'll continue some of the themes at the large statewide summit. It'll be 3 days in a virtual environment this year. This time we do it every 2 years, so keep an eye out for that. Have a great holiday season and stay safe. Remember to wear your mask and keep your distance. Bye, everybody. I forgot to say thank you to the Governor's Institute. Great team to help us support, and Sarah Smith and the team at DPH that helped pull this together again. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.